I'm David Morrow. I'm 39 years old, a former warrant officer in the U.S. Army, specialized in cyber counterintelligence. For nearly 16 years, I lived in the shadows of secure bunkers and glass war rooms, tracking digital footprints, decoding hostile networks, and neutralizing threats before they even made the news. Most of my missions were classified, the kind that leave no medals and even fewer names on the record. I didn't chase attention. I was trained to disappear into systems, to watch from within, and to dismantle operations without ever being seen. My skill wasn't in pulling a trigger, but in making sure no one even knew where the bullet came from. When I left the military, I wasn't looking for a spotlight. A private firm reached out, one of those firms that doesn't post on LinkedIn and never sends recruiters. They wanted someone who could do more than just audit firewalls. They needed a tactician, someone who understood infiltration, containment, and silent control. Officially, I came in as a security advisor. Unofficially, I was a quiet enforcer for the board. I reported to no one on the ground. My job was to observe, map every fault line, and make sure when the time came, I could flip the building inside out without leaving a mess. I was the insurance policy no one saw coming, and by the time they realized, it was already too late. It was one of those curated dinner parties meant to impress and intimidate at the same time. My wife, Elise, insisted we host it. She said it was good for her image, a gathering of the company's top execs and their spouses. I knew the type, men with teeth too white and watches too loud, women with perfect laughs that never touched their eyes. The dining room smelled of rosemary and money. Every chair was filled with someone who'd shaken hands with a senator or crushed a junior associate's career before dessert. I sat at the edge of the table, a few seats down from Elise, who barely acknowledged me beyond a forced smile when I poured her wine. Across from me was Carter West, CEO of the firm Elise had climbed her way into. He had that brand of arrogance that only came from thinking rules were for other people. Midway through the meal, he raised his glass, leaned back, and said with a half smirk, "So, Dave, how's retired life? Still polishing boots and reading war novels?" The table laughed, soft and practiced. Elise giggled too. Not the laugh she gave when I used to surprise her with flowers or dumb jokes. This one was for them. For him. I smiled back, just enough to make it look natural. Said something about finding peace in the quiet. He waved it off, said guys like me must miss the action. Then came the second jab. He asked if I was still living off military pensions or if Elise had upgraded me to house husband status. Someone down the table coughed to hide a laugh. Elise didn't correct him. She took a sip of her wine, glanced at Carter, and touched his arm like they were in on a private joke. It didn't end there. The CFO chimed in with a story about his own time in ROTC. Said the Army was where he learned how not to run a company. That got a real laugh. Someone else mentioned security clearances, tossed in a joke about tin hats and paranoia. I just kept eating, one bite at a time, like the food mattered more than the tone of the room. They made me small on purpose. Turned my silence into weakness. They didn't ask about what I did now, because they didn't care. I wasn't one of them. I was Elise's accessory, the boring background character with a military past and no future. And still, I smiled. I watched. I filed away every word, every smirk, every flick of her hand on his jacket. Because when the reckoning came, it wouldn't be loud, it would be precise. And they'd never see it coming. Most people in the company thought I was just another IT guy with a military past. My title read Senior Systems Security Consultant, harmless, forgettable, the kind of role that made people nod politely in the elevator and move on. That was exactly the point. The board brought me in 2 years ago, quietly. They needed someone who could detect a pattern before it became a scandal. Someone trained not just in code, but in intent. My clearance in the Army wasn't about accessing files. It was about understanding what people hide and how to make them reveal it without saying a word. By the time I walked into that building, they already suspected corruption, embezzlement, insider trading, pay-to-play contracts. But they needed confirmation. External audits had failed, Whistleblowers went silent. What they wanted was someone who could move without tripping alarms. A ghost with a badge. My job wasn't to fix firewalls or install antivirus software. My job was to listen, to trace digital shadows, and to connect dots others didn't even see. I studied calendar logs, badge swipes, expense reports, message metadata. I ran simulations in silence, cross-referenced patterns, and logged every deviation like it was evidence in a war zone. I wasn't just hunting money trails. I was mapping loyalties. I watched how teams formed, which voices were always loudest in meetings, who stayed behind after hours, and who suddenly started taking more international trips on company cards. Every detail mattered, especially the things people thought no one was watching. I kept my reports off the main servers, stored them on a secure drive I wore like a dog tag. Every week, I'd brief one board member face to face. No emails, no calls. Just encrypted notes and quiet nods. And over time, the picture became clearer. The corruption wasn't just real. It was worse than anyone thought. And at the center of it all stood the very people who mocked me at that dinner table. The loudest voices, the most polished smiles. The ones Elise had wrapped herself around like armor. But the board didn't want headlines. They wanted control. And they trusted me to take it back, methodically and without mercy. I wasn't just in the room to observe. I was there to dismantle everything from the inside out. And I had already started. The deeper I looked, the more the surface started to crack. I didn't go in alone. I built a team the way we did in the field, small, compartmentalized, and trusted. One was a forensic accountant from my Army days, another a former NSA analyst. The third was a private sector mole who knew how to vanish from security logs like smoke. No names, no traces. We operated after hours, off the grid. Used burner laptops, isolated VPNs, offline drives. I rerouted access logs through dummy accounts and planted time delay queries to mimic system noise. Every pull of data had to look like a glitch or maintenance request. Every report was manually scrubbed before it ever touched company servers. The rot started with Derek, the CEO. He was rerouting vendor payments through two holding firms, both linked to an offshore account in Belize. The wiring patterns were buried under layers of legal insulation, but the timestamps didn't lie. One vendor invoice would spike. Hours later, a deposit hit a shell account. Rinse. Repeat. Todd, the CFO, covered the tracks with fake project budgets and duplicate expense lines. He billed the same conference twice, changed city names, shuffled codes. Liam signed off on everything. His signature was everywhere, but his knowledge of what he was approving was paper thin. That was intentional. Then came the personal accounts. Spa trips logged as wellness retreats. First-class upgrades under client entertainment. Meal receipts from cities the clients had never even visited. The digital paper trail was damning, but I needed more than numbers. We placed wireless mics in executive lounges, bugged two private offices using power strip transmitters, and cross-checked voice data with calendar logs. They bragged freely, thought they were untouchable. I archived every word. And Elise. She wasn't clean either. A trip to Prague marked as a business development summit turned out to be a private stay funded by one of the vendors Derek had on the take. Her name appeared in one contract memo, buried in fine print under a pseudonym she used before marriage. I didn't flinch. I cataloged everything. Timestamped, indexed, and locked away on drives only I could access. No one suspected the quiet guy in the corner. That was the plan all along. I wasn't just gathering evidence. I was building their reckoning, brick by brick. Monday morning, 7:58 a.m., I stood outside the executive boardroom. The glass was frosted, lights already on inside. I could see blurred outlines of suits, steaming coffee cups, and the occasional flick of a manicured hand. My reflection stared back at me from the steel handle. Calm, flat, unreadable. Trent opened the door from the inside, gave a subtle nod. The air was tight with fake confidence. Laughter buzzed around the room like flies over something rotting. I stepped in without a word and moved to the shadows near the windows. They didn't notice at first. Derek was mid-sentence, some tired joke about delayed bonuses. Elise sipped her latte like it was another Monday. Todd glanced up, paused, and squinted. I stepped forward, steady and slow, reached for the guest badge clipped to my collar and let it fall to the floor. Actually, I'll take the head. The sound of the chair sliding back was sharp. Everyone turned. I dropped a heavy black folder onto the polished table. It hit with a thud that cut through the silence. The top page slipped out just enough to reveal the company seal and a thick red stamp, internal inquiry, confidential. Derek blinked. Elisa's smile tightened. Tolt didn't move. I clicked the remote. The projector screen dropped behind me. Slide 1 lit up with wireframe clarity, offshore account, Belize, dates, transfers, matching vendor codes. Elisa's name flashed in the corner of a summary email she thought she deleted 6 months ago. Let's start here. Click. Slide 2. A table of duplicate invoices, locations didn't match. Signatures did. Todd's initials on all of them. He tried to speak, but the words stuck. Click. Slide 3. Email exchange. Derek forwarding a fake vendor contract to an encrypted account. A quiet gasp broke from someone at the end of the table. Click. Audio file. A slow play of Liam's voice from a late-night phone call. Bragging about burying numbers before the quarterly audit, his chair creaked as he shifted, sweating in silence. Elise stood. This is outrageous. Sit. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Click. Surveillance photo. Elise in Prague, laughing over wine with a vendor she swore she never met. Hotel bill underneath. Paid with a corporate card. Categorized under wellness. Click. Audio again. Derek and Liam. Bar chatter. Their laughter filled the room, casual, cruel. Talking about shredding backup drives and ghosting interns. The tension snapped into stillness. You all thought I was just a security guy, the quiet one, but I wasn't hired to protect your files. I was hired to protect the company from you. Slide after slide, emails, voice logs, fake receipts. Every time someone tried to speak, I gave them something worse. I wanted silence. I got it. Trente. He dropped a stack of envelopes, one for each seat. Termination letters, security protocols, personal item retrieval slips. You don't work here anymore. Derek slammed his hand on the table. This is illegal. No, it's overdue. One final slide. A signed letter of acquisition. Ownership transfer. Legal, sealed, dated. Elise stared at it like it was a death certificate. You're looking at your replacement. I didn't smile. I just stood still and watched them break, piece by piece. Operation Phoenix wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. And it had just begun. Elise didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, staring at the envelope in her hand like it couldn't possibly be real. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The divorce papers were clean, professional, cold, just like what we had become. She tried to speak. Started with something about misunderstanding, about things being out of context. I let her talk for maybe 5 seconds, then looked her dead in the eyes and said nothing. That silence hit harder than anything I could have yelled. She looked smaller now, not just in height, but in presence. The fire she wore around her friends was gone. All that was left was someone who finally realized the man she thought was invisible had been watching all along. Her voice cracked when she brought up that night. The dinner party, how it was just a joke, just people having fun. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just reminded her of the words she said that night, the ones that sank deeper than she ever knew. Good thing he's harmless. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Her touch didn't mean what it used to. Nothing did. Not the house, not the vacations, not the framed wedding photo still sitting in the hallway. It wasn't revenge. I didn't want her to suffer. I just needed to be free. From the lies, from the performative affection, from pretending I didn't see what was always right in front of me. When I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant, just clear, like stepping out of fog after far too long. Let her make her statements. Let her spin her version. But for me, it was done, and that was enough. The morning after the firings, I sat in the same chair at the head of the table. But this time, the air felt different. Lighter, like the building itself could finally breathe again. I didn't come in with a list of punishments. I came in with a plan to rebuild. The first thing I did was send emails to every employee who had ever reported misconduct. No generic HR form, just a direct message from me, inviting them to talk. Most didn't respond at first, but one by one, they started showing up. Some of them were angry, some were cautious. One admin said she hadn't smiled at work in 2 years. I listened, took notes, and made it clear this was not a one-time gesture. The open-door policy wasn't for show. Then came the hires. I brought back 3 analysts who had quit under Elise's regime. I gave a promotion to a young woman in compliance who flagged irregularities months ago and was told to keep quiet. But the moment that stayed with me was Eddie. Eddie had been with us for years. A quiet guy, always early, always respectful. Most people didn't even know he was a veteran. I found out through a side conversation with facilities. He used to lead recon teams overseas. Came home, applied here, and got assigned to equipment audits. He never complained, never asked for more. But when I brought him into my office and asked if he wanted to run our new risk assessment unit, he didn't blink. He just said, "Thank you for seeing me." Within a month, Eddie had built the tightest intel unit in the firm. Quiet operators. All former military, focused, efficient, respected, no swagger, just results. We rewrote the ethics handbook from scratch, built anonymous channels for reporting, posted internal metrics on a public dashboard so people knew we were walking the talk. No more closed loops, no more gatekeeping. The tone changed fast. Meetings got shorter, deadlines got sharper. People started speaking up, offering ideas, pushing back without fear. I approved budgets for leadership training and hired outside coaches to mentor junior staff. It wasn't about revenge. It was about resetting what we stood for, giving good people the room to be seen, to matter, to rise. The building didn't look different from the outside, but inside it was brand new, and it finally felt like a place worth walking into again. It was a quiet morning when I pulled up to the cemetery just outside Fort Carson, the kind of sky that doesn't say much, just hangs there and listens. I walked to the far row, boots sinking a little in the soft dirt, and stopped at a headstone I hadn't visited in years. Staff Sergeant Miguel Reyes. He saved my life in Kandahar. Took shrapnel meant for me. Never bragged, never asked for anything. The plaque I brought today was brass, heavy, and clean. I kneeled and screwed it into the ground below his name. It read, "You never saw him coming." But when he arrived, everything changed. I didn't say much. Just stayed there for a while, head down, letting the silence sit. Then I stood, wiped the dust from my knees, and walked back to the truck. Inside the glove box was a folder, finalized last night. The board had approved the scholarship fund, the Reyes Initiative, full tuition for veterans in cybersecurity, engineering, or ethics. No essay, no interviews, just proof of service and a plan. The first round was already funded. My bonus check from the federal contract we just secured covered most of it. That contract changed everything. The press called us a comeback story. I didn't argue, but it wasn't about headlines. It was about building something that couldn't be corrupted, something worth protecting. Back at the office, the mood was different now. People held doors open. Conversations didn't come with agendas. We'd cleared the rot. And now, something better had room to grow. One afternoon, I walked past the prototype lab and saw Theo, the janitor we almost overlooked. He was standing at the whiteboard, mid-pitch, surrounded by engineers. I stopped just outside the door and watched. They were listening, taking notes, nodding. Theo's first design had just been approved for patent. An automation system that cut down waste in our compliance loop by 40%. His name was on the filing, and next week, he'd be presenting it at the National Defense Tech Conference. He looked up and saw me, just nodded once. I nodded back. They thought they buried me. Quiet guy, no flash, easy to ignore. But they didn't know silence is where fire starts. And I had been burning for a long, long time,